You've felt it. The moment after you speak too much and something slips away. Respect thins. Attention drifts. Authority weakens without a sound. This tension is not social anxiety or a lack of confidence. It's a signal. Power does not announce itself. It settles. Men who speak endlessly confuse motion with control. The world does not reward volume. It responds to gravity. Silence is not withdrawal. It is pressure held in reserve. The first truth tied to why talking too much destroys your authority is simple and uncomfortable. Authority begins where explanation ends. The moment you feel the urge to clarify yourself repeatedly, something has already shifted. Not in the room, but in you. Excessive speech is rarely about helping others understand. It is about relieving internal pressure, and pressure released too early cannot be used. Watch how authority behaves in real life. The man in charge does not narrate his importance. He does not rush to justify decisions. He states, then waits. Silence follows, not because he has nothing to say, but because he has already said what matters. Those who speak after him adjust their tone. Their words react to his stillness. This is not strategy. It is gravity. When you talk too much, you reveal your dependence on response. You begin measuring yourself by reactions, nods, smiles, agreement. The room senses this instantly, not consciously, but biologically. Humans are wired to follow what feels stable. Excess speech signals instability, even when the content is intelligent, especially when it is intelligent. Intelligence that over-explains starts to feel defensive. Consider a simple exchange. You make a statement. Someone challenges it. One man answers briefly and stops. Another keeps adding context, examples, reasoning, stories. Who appears certain? Not the one with more words. Certainty does not stack arguments. It occupies space and lets silence defend it. Silence forces others to do the work, to interpret, to adjust, to come closer. Talking too much does the opposite. It chases approval outward. It collapses distance. Authority requires distance, not emotional coldness, but psychological space. Space is where others project meaning onto you. When you fill every gap with words, you steal that space from them. There is a reason negotiations slow down when one side talks excessively. Information leaks. Intentions surface. Leverage evaporates. The same happens in everyday life. At work, in relationships, in conflict. The man who cannot stop talking shows his hand before the game begins. One sentence is enough to anchor this lesson. Silence is not absence, it is selection. If you feel discomfort when you stop speaking, pay attention to that sensation. That is not weakness. That is unused authority pressing against habit. Most men drown it with noise. A few learn to hold it, letting the weight remain unresolved, letting others feel it instead. The second truth behind why talking too much destroys your authority is this. Explanation is often a substitute for presence. When a man speaks beyond necessity, he is not clarifying his position. He is trying to be felt. Authority does not need to be felt loudly. It needs to be assumed quietly. Notice how this plays out in ordinary moments. A meeting where one man keeps expanding his point, adding layers, anticipating objections before they are raised. The more he speaks, the less the room holds him. Attention slips sideways. People stop listening for meaning and start listening for an opening. The silence that should have worked for him is now working against him. Presence is not built through information density. It is built through restraint. When you say less, your words stand alone. When you say too much, they lean on each other for support. And anything that needs support is already unstable. Talking too much collapses the frame. Instead of others orienting themselves around you, you begin orbiting them. You adjust your tone mid-sentence. You soften statements before they are tested. You preemptively retreat. None of this is conscious. That is what makes it dangerous. Authority is rarely lost through dramatic failure. It erodes through small concessions made out of discomfort with silence. Think of silence as a boundary. It signals where you end and others begin. When you remove that boundary with constant speech, you invite intrusion. Questions multiply. Challenges escalate. Respect becomes conditional. The man who speaks sparingly is questioned less, not because he is feared, but because he appears complete. There is a quiet hierarchy in every room. It forms without permission. Those who talk the most usually sit lower in it, regardless of intelligence or competence. The hierarchy responds to control, not expression. Control over timing, control over reaction, control over when something ends. Silence also exposes others. When you stop talking, the pressure transfers. Someone else must move. Fill the gap. Reveal their intent. This is power without aggression. The man who overtalks absorbs all the pressure himself and calls it engagement. One sentence holds this lesson. Words explain. Presence decides. If you feel the impulse to keep speaking after your point has landed, observe it without acting. That impulse is the habit that has been quietly bargaining away your authority for relief. Let it sit. Let the room respond first. Let the silence show you who you are without the noise. The third truth about why talking too much destroys your authority is that it hands control of the frame to others. The frame is not the topic being discussed. It is who sets the terms, the pace, and the emotional temperature of the interaction. The man who speaks excessively rarely notices when he has lost it, because loss of frame feels like participation. When you keep talking, you invite interruption without resistance. You allow others to steer the conversation by reacting to fragments of what you say instead of the whole. Your message becomes negotiable before it has even settled. Authority requires finality. Not rigidity, but an internal sense that what you said stands on its own. Watch how people test boundaries. They do not challenge strength directly. They probe for movement. They throw small comments, half objections, casual disagreements. The man who talks too much responds to all of them. He explains again. He clarifies. He adjusts. Each response shifts the frame slightly away from him. Soon, he is no longer leading the exchange. He is managing reactions. Silence resists this. When you stop speaking, you deny easy access. Others must either commit to a real challenge or retreat. Most retreat, not because they are intimidated, but because the cost of engagement rises. Silence raises the price of interaction. Talking too much lowers it until anyone can afford to step in. Consider arguments. The man who floods the space with words often believes he is winning by volume. In reality, he is exposing emotional investment. He needs the other person to understand, to agree, to acknowledge. Authority does not need acknowledgement in the moment. It moves forward regardless of consensus. Frame control is also about timing. When you speak continuously, you surrender timing. You rush to fill gaps before they form. You answer questions that were not fully asked. You respond before the weight of a statement has been felt. The result is a flat exchange with no tension, no hierarchy, no consequence. There is a reason silence makes people uncomfortable. It removes cues. It forces them to confront uncertainty. The man who can tolerate this discomfort without rushing to resolve it holds the frame. The man who cannot will always chase it with words. One sentence anchors this lesson. Whoever controls the pause controls the exchange. If you notice yourself speaking faster, longer, or louder to maintain control, that is the moment it is already gone. Control is quiet. It does not compete. It waits. And while it waits, others adjust themselves around it, often without realizing why. The fourth truth behind why talking too much destroys your authority is that it exposes need before intention. Need is not always desperation. Often it is subtle. The need to be understood, the need to be seen as reasonable, the need to control how others perceive you. Words become a shield for that need, but shields make noise when struck. Authority moves in the opposite order. Intention first, expression later, if at all. When you speak excessively, you reverse that order. You reveal what you want before you establish who you are. The room senses the imbalance. It hears urgency where there should be resolve. Look closely at how need leaks through language, the repeated clarifications, the justifications that arrive uninvited, the examples added just in case. Each addition signals that the statement could not stand alone. Even if the content is accurate, the delivery weakens it. Authority is not carried by correctness. It is carried by containment. In professional settings, this mistake is constant. A man presents an idea, then spends twice as long defending it against objections that have not been voiced. He believes he is being thorough. What he is actually doing is announcing uncertainty. Others begin to evaluate him, not the idea. The shift is quiet, but irreversible. In personal relationships, the pattern deepens. Over-explaining feelings, intentions, or decisions often feels honest. In reality, it transfers emotional labor to the listener. They sense the weight. They feel pulled into managing your internal state. Authority cannot coexist with that pull. It dissolves the moment you ask someone else to hold you steady. Silence prevents this leakage. When you stop speaking, your needs remain internal. Others engage with what you presented, not with what you are trying to protect. This preserves leverage, not manipulation, but self-possession. There is also a moral dimension here. Speaking less forces discipline. You must decide what is essential and discard the rest. That decision sharpens character. Men who talk too much avoid that discipline. They outsource it to the listener, hoping volume will compensate for lack of selection. One sentence holds this lesson in place. Need speaks. Authority waits. If you feel compelled to add one more sentence to secure your position, pause instead. The discomfort you feel is the cost of keeping your intent intact. Let it remain unresolved. Let others respond to what you chose to say, not to what you were afraid to leave unsaid. The fifth truth behind why talking too much destroys your authority is that it dulls consequence. Words only carry weight when silence surrounds them. When everything is said, nothing lands. Authority depends on consequence, and consequence depends on scarcity. Look at how people respond to constant talk. They begin to predict you, your tone, your patterns, your conclusions. Once predictability sets in, your presence stops altering the room. You are no longer an event. You are background. Background does not command. It fills space while others decide what matters. Consequence is not punishment or dominance. It is the awareness that what you say changes something. That awareness fades when words are always available. If every thought is expressed, none feel deliberate. Deliberation is sensed, even when it is not announced. It slows time. It makes others lean in, if only internally. This is why silence amplifies moments. A brief statement followed by restraint forces others to measure their response. They weigh their words. They choose carefully. Talking too much removes that friction. It makes interaction cheap. Cheap interaction invites carelessness, and carelessness erodes respect. Consider leadership under pressure. In uncertainty, some men speak continuously to reassure themselves and others. They narrate every step, every option, every risk. The intent is control. The result is diffusion. When everything is shared, responsibility becomes unclear. Authority requires that some weight remains unspoken, held, contained. Silence also preserves memory. People remember what interrupts noise. A single sentence delivered without follow-up often echoes longer than a paragraph wrapped in explanation, not because it was profound, but because it stood alone. Standing alone is what authority does. There is an internal cost to overtalking as well. You begin to rely on momentum instead of judgment. Speech becomes automatic. Automatic behavior cannot command respect, even from yourself. Restraint restores judgment. Judgment restores consequence. One sentence anchors this lesson. What is rare is respected. If you notice that people stop responding with care to what you say, do not speak louder or longer. Withdraw. Reduce. Allow absence to do what excess never could. Let your words return with edges, with limits, with the quiet threat of meaning that only silence can preserve. The sixth truth about why talking too much destroys your authority is that it erases asymmetry. Authority depends on imbalance, not inequality of worth, but inequality of access. When everyone knows everything you think, when every reaction is verbalized, the distance that creates weight disappears. You become transparent, and transparency feels fair, but it is not powerful. Asymmetry is what makes people cautious around you. It is the sense that you are not fully readable, not because you are hiding, but because you are selective. Selectivity creates uncertainty. Uncertainty creates attention. Attention is the soil where authority grows. Men who talk too much flatten themselves. They make their internal process public. Doubts, revisions, emotional fluctuations leak into the open. Others no longer respond to the final position. They respond to the process. Once your process is on display, your position loses force. Authority is not how you arrived. It is where you stand. Think of a man who speaks rarely. When he does, people listen differently. They do not interrupt casually. They do not dismiss easily. They sense that access is limited. Limited access increases value. Unlimited access invites disregard. This applies beyond speech. When you are always available, always explaining, always engaging, you teach others how to treat you. You teach them that your attention is free and your reactions predictable. Authority cannot survive that lesson. Silence restores asymmetry. It creates a gap between stimulus and response. In that gap, others project meaning, caution, even restraint. They do not know what you will say next or if you will say anything at all. That uncertainty disciplines their behavior more effectively than any verbal correction. There is discomfort in this. Silence can feel like withholding, like arrogance, like detachment. But these feelings belong to those who rely on reciprocity to feel secure. Authority does not negotiate comfort, it maintains structure. Overtalking is often framed as openness or honesty. But honesty without restraint becomes exposure. Exposure invites consumption. Authority resists consumption by limiting what is offered. One sentence secures this lesson. Access reduces weight. If you notice people treating your words casually, interrupting freely, or assuming your reactions, reduce access. Speak less, respond slower. Let the imbalance return. Authority does not need to be asserted. It reappears when asymmetry is restored and maintained. The seventh truth behind why talking too much destroys your authority is that it trains others to ignore you. This does not happen through disrespect. It happens through adaptation. People adapt to patterns faster than they admit. When you speak constantly, the mind of the listener learns that nothing is urgent, nothing is final, nothing requires adjustment. Noise becomes environmental, like traffic outside a window. It fades into the background. The listener may still hear you, but they no longer orient themselves around what you say. Authority depends on orientation. When your words no longer shift posture, attention, or behavior, authority has already left the room. This is why repetition weakens influence. When a man explains the same point from multiple angles, he believes he is increasing clarity. In reality, he is signaling that the point did not matter enough the first time. Others stop listening for meaning and start listening for redundancy. Once redundancy is detected, attention disengages. Silence disrupts adaptation. It breaks the pattern. When you do not speak as expected, the listener becomes alert. Their nervous system recalibrates. They wait. Waiting creates receptivity. Receptivity is where authority operates. Notice how people react when someone who is usually quiet finally speaks. Heads turn. The room shifts. The words are weighed before they are judged. The same words spoken by someone who talks constantly would pass unnoticed. Authority is not in the sentence. It is in the contrast. Talking too much also trains others to interrupt you. If you always keep going, interruption carries no cost. They know you will continue. They know you will adjust. Silence introduces cost. When you stop speaking, interruption becomes visible. It feels heavier. People hesitate. There is also an internal consequence. When you are used to filling space with words, silence begins to feel threatening. You rush to escape it. That urgency leaks into your voice. Others sense it. They begin to lead the interaction, not because they intend to, but because you surrendered the ground by refusing to hold it quietly. Authority requires tolerance for emptiness, empty space, unanswered moments, incomplete exchanges. Most men rush to close these gaps. They mistake closure for control. In doing so, they remove the very tension that made their presence matter. One sentence anchors this lesson. What is constant is discounted. If you suspect that people hear you but no longer adjust to you, do not push harder. Withdraw. Let absence retrain attention. Let silence reset the pattern. Let your next words arrive as an interruption to noise, not an addition to it. The eighth truth behind why talking too much destroys your authority is that it replaces judgment with reaction. Authority is rooted in judgment. Reaction is its opposite. When you speak immediately and continuously, you are not deciding. You are responding. And response, no matter how articulate, places you downstream. Reaction feels alive. It feels engaged. It feels present. That is why it is addictive. But authority is not animated by speed. It is shaped by delay. Delay creates hierarchy. The one who reacts fastest is rarely the one who decides the outcome. Observe conflict. The man who answers every remark, counters every challenge, and fills every pause believes he is defending his position. In reality, he is allowing the situation to dictate his behavior. His words are shaped by what comes at him. Authority moves in the opposite direction. It forces others to move first, to reveal their angle, to commit. Silence interrupts the chain of reaction. When you do not respond immediately, the other person must sit with their own words. They hear them again, they feel their weight. Sometimes they soften, sometimes they retreat, sometimes they escalate. But now they are exposed, not you. Talking too much shields them from that exposure. Reaction also compresses perspective. When you speak without pause, you collapse time. You treat every moment as equal. Authority discriminates. It decides which moments deserve response and which do not. That discrimination is felt. People sense when you are choosing rather than reacting. In professional life, this distinction is critical. A man who answers every email instantly, comments on every issue, and weighs in on every discussion becomes operational, not authoritative. He is useful, not decisive. Utility invites demand. Authority invites alignment. Alignment only occurs when others trust your judgment more than your availability. Reaction erodes internal discipline as well. You stop asking yourself whether something deserves speech. You only ask how to phrase it. Over time, this weakens your capacity to hold tension without discharge. Silence restores that capacity. It forces you to feel the urge to react without obeying it. There is restraint in this that many mistake for passivity. It is not. It is filtration. Most stimuli do not deserve expression. Most provocations do not deserve response. Authority is built by refusing to be moved by what does not matter. One sentence secures this lesson. Reaction follows. Judgment leads. If you notice yourself speaking because something demanded a response rather than because you chose to speak, stop. Let the demand remain unmet. Let the moment hang. Authority returns when your words come from decision, not reflex, and when silence proves you are not governed by the noise around you. The ninth truth behind why talking too much destroys your authority is that it dissolves internal hierarchy. Authority over others is impossible without authority over yourself. Excessive speech is often the first sign that this internal order has weakened. Inside every man there is a chain of command: thought, judgment, decision, expression. When that chain is intact, speech is measured. When it breaks, expression jumps the line. Thoughts escape before they are tested. Feelings surface before they are examined. Words appear before they are authorized. The result is not honesty. It is disorder. People sense this immediately. Not the words themselves, but the lack of containment behind them. A man who cannot govern his speech signals that he may not govern his reactions, his commitments, or his limits. Authority cannot rest on that foundation. Talking too much also creates self-contradiction. When you speak continuously, you revise yourself in public. You correct mid-sentence. You soften statements after making them. You explain away firmness. Others stop treating your words as fixed points. They wait for the adjustment. Once adjustment is expected, authority disappears. Silence prevents this. It gives you time to align internally before you speak. It forces you to decide what you actually stand behind. That decision strengthens internal hierarchy. When your words finally arrive, they carry coherence. Coherence is felt as authority. There is also a deeper consequence. When you habitually overtalk, you stop listening to yourself. Speech becomes noise you produce rather than meaning you choose. Silence restores self-awareness. In quiet, you hear hesitation. You hear certainty. You hear the difference. That difference matters. Men who avoid silence often fear what it reveals. Uncertainty, conflict, unresolved thought. But avoiding that discomfort does not remove it. It only transfers it outward through speech. Authority requires the opposite move, pulling tension inward, resolving it privately. Speaking only after order is restored. This is why restraint feels heavy at first. You are carrying weight you once dropped into the room. That weight builds strength. Internal strength precedes external authority. One sentence anchors this lesson. What you cannot contain, you cannot command. If you feel the urge to speak before you have decided what you believe, resist it. Let silence force the decision internally. Let your words wait until they have permission. Authority grows where inner order is preserved and expression becomes the final step, not the first. The final truth behind why talking too much destroys your authority is that it confuses presence with performance. Performance seeks response. Presence creates effect. When a man speaks as if he must be heard to exist, he turns interaction into a stage. Authority does not perform, it occupies. Performance changes with the audience, tone shifts, emphasis adapts. Words multiply to maintain engagement. Presence remains unchanged. It does not adjust to be received. It stands and lets others decide how to approach it. Talking too much is often the attempt to manage perception in real time. That management is visible. Visibility weakens force. Think of the difference between a man who explains himself and a man who allows misunderstanding to sit. The first rushes to correct the image others might form. The second allows time to filter noise from signal. Authority is not threatened by temporary misunderstanding. It is threatened by desperation to be clear. Performance also drains endurance. Constant speech requires constant energy. Over time, this creates emotional leakage. Frustration shows. Irritation slips in. The voice tightens. Authority frays at the edges long before words fail. Silence conserves energy. Conserved energy deepens presence. People feel it without being told. In social environments, performance invites evaluation. Others judge delivery, coherence, likability. Presence bypasses evaluation and moves straight to impact. You do not judge a mountain's arguments. You orient around it. Excessive speech invites comparison. Comparison erodes authority by making it conditional. There is also a moral restraint here. Performance tempts exaggeration. You embellish to hold attention. You emphasize to secure agreement. Small distortions creep in. Over time, you become less aligned with what you actually believe. Authority cannot survive misalignment. Silence protects alignment by reducing the pressure to entertain. When you speak only when necessary, you remove the need to maintain an image. You are not selling yourself. You are simply there. That simplicity is unsettling in a world trained on noise. Unsettling presence often reads as power. This does not mean withdrawal or muteness. It means speech with intent and silence with acceptance. Acceptance that you do not need to be constantly interpreted. Acceptance that authority does not ask to be recognized. It is recognized because it does not ask. One sentence holds this truth steady. Presence does not audition. If you feel the pull to keep talking so you are not forgotten, resist it. Let the room adjust to your stillness. Let your absence from the noise speak for you. Let authority remain unperformed, unadvertised, and intact as the pressure stays where it belongs. If this way of thinking holds weight for you, stay close to it. Subscribe to the channel, not for motivation, not for noise, but to keep your mind disciplined where most let it drift.